The worn linoleum tiles of Jefferson Elementary squeaked under the expensive leather soles of Brad Wellington's shoes as he walked beside Principal Monroe. Though his custom-tailored navy suit and gleaming watch set him apart from the modest brick hallways and flickering lights, Brad's easy smile and warm tone made him feel right at home. "We can't thank you enough for your donation, Mr. Wellington," Principal Monroe said, her arms full of newly delivered school supplies. "Not many people in your position remember places like this." Brad chuckled, glancing at a colorful mural of handprints on the wall. "Well, I grew up in places like this. My mother taught second grade in a school not much different. If we don't help our kids, who will?" As they turned the corner, they passed a classroom with the door slightly ajar. Children sat at their desks, drawing with fresh crayons, their chatter rising and falling like a melody. One small boy stood in the doorway, his backpack still on. Brad paused, sensing eyes on him. He turned and met the gaze of a first grader with tousled brown hair and large hazel eyes filled with curiosity and sorrow. "Hi there," Brad said, crouching to the boy's level. "What's your name?" The little boy blinked at him, clinging to the strap of his backpack like a lifeline. Then, in a soft, almost inaudible voice, he whispered, "You look like my dad." Before Brad could respond, a gentle hand rested on the boy's shoulder. "Liam," said Ms. Rivers, the classroom teacher, her voice calm but cautious. "Let's give our guest some space, sweetheart." Brad rose slowly as Liam turned his head toward his teacher. Ms. Rivers gave Brad a tight smile and said apologetically, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Wellington. His father passed away last year. He was a firefighter. It's been a hard adjustment." Brad's chest tightened. "There's no need to apologize. He didn't do anything wrong." Still holding Liam close, Ms. Rivers nodded. "I just thought you should know. He hasn't spoken much to new people since it happened. But he spoke to you. That's something." Brad glanced down the hallway where Liam's classmates were still busy drawing. "Would it be all right if I stopped by your class for a few minutes, just to say hi?" Ms. Rivers blinked, surprised. "Of course. I think they'd love that." Later that evening, Liam sat at the kitchen table, swinging his feet as he pushed peas around his plate. His mother, Nina Browning, quietly filled his glass with milk. Her eyes were tired, but alert. She noticed the faraway look in his eyes. "You were quiet at pickup today," Nina said gently, sitting across from him. Liam hesitated, glancing at her before looking back at his peas. "I saw someone at school." "Oh yeah?" she asked, spooning mashed potatoes onto her own plate. "A man. He brought us new crayons and pencils and games." He paused, then added, "He looked like Daddy." Nina's hand stopped mid-motion. She slowly set the spoon down. "You mean Mr. Wellington?" Liam nodded. "He talked to me." Nina reached across the table and rested her hand over his. "Sweetheart," she began carefully, "I talked to Ms. Rivers. She told me he was very kind to you." Liam's eyes filled again. "He sounded like Daddy too." "Oh baby," Nina stood, kneeling beside his chair. "I miss your dad every single day too, and sometimes someone might remind us of him. That's okay. That just means your heart remembers him." He looked at her, voice small. "Do you think Daddy sent him?" Nina smiled sadly, brushing his hair back. "Maybe. Or maybe Mr. Wellington is just a really good man who wants to help kids like you. Sometimes people show up in our lives for reasons we don't understand right away." Liam leaned into her, resting his head on her shoulder. "He made me feel safe, like Daddy used to." Nina closed her eyes, hugging him tightly. As she held her son, she made a quiet note to herself. Reach out to Mr. Wellington. Maybe, just maybe, he was more than a passing donor. Maybe he was someone who could help bring light back into a little boy's world. Brad sat behind his wide mahogany desk, city lights twinkling through the wall of glass behind him. The soft hum of his office was usually comforting, but today, his thoughts were anything but quiet. Liam's words echoed in his mind like a haunting melody. "You look like my dad." He hadn't thought about fatherhood in years, not since Bella. Since then, his company had become his family. Wellington Industries flourished, but something inside him quietly withered. Until that little boy looked up at him with those wide, aching eyes. Brad couldn't let it go. He needed to know if Liam was okay after their brief encounter, and maybe if the resemblance to this Jackson Browning was more than coincidence. So he cleared his afternoon and drove across town to Jefferson Elementary, arriving just as the final bell rang. Kids poured from the front doors like a rushing tide, waving drawings, laughing and calling for parents. Brad spotted Liam at the far end of the courtyard, clutching his mother's hand. And then she turned. Brad stopped cold, his breath caught. She was beautiful in a quiet, strong kind of way. Not in the way of polished socialites he usually crossed paths with. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her jeans worn at the knees, and her eyes, deep brown and wide, froze when they met his. Her lips parted as she stared, stunned. "Jackson?" she whispered, barely audible over the crowd noise. Brad stepped forward quickly, hands raised. "No, sorry, I'm Brad Wellington." Her expression faltered, breath shaky. "I'm sorry, you look so much like him." Liam said something similar, Brad said gently. "I was here earlier this week dropping off supplies. He spoke to me, said I look like his dad." She glanced down at Liam, who was staring up at Brad with a mix of curiosity and quiet recognition. "I wanted to make sure he was all right," Brad continued. "I know sometimes seeing someone who looks familiar can be overwhelming." Nina nodded slowly. "It's been a hard year. Jackson was a firefighter. He died saving a family from an apartment fire. Liam still talks about him every day." Brad's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. He sounds like he was a brave man." "He was," she said softly. There was a beat of silence before Brad cleared his throat. "I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if you and Liam would like to grab a milkshake with me, just to talk. Maybe figure out if there's a chance your Jackson and I were related." Nina hesitated, her eyes scanning his face, searching for intention. Liam tugged at her hand. "Can we, Mommy? Please?" Nina's heart softened at the hope in her son's eyes. She glanced at Brad again, sensing no harm in his posture, just warmth, curiosity. "All right," she said. "There's a diner down the street." Brad smiled. "Perfect." As they walked toward the parking lot, Nina holding Liam's hand and Brad beside them, an invisible thread began to weave between them, born not just of resemblance or grief, but something deeper, something waiting to be uncovered. The corner booth at Rosie's Diner was bathed in soft, golden light as the late afternoon sun filtered through the windows. Empty milkshake glasses sat on the table, one chocolate, one vanilla, and one strawberry half-finished, with Liam's straw still resting at an angle. Brad and Nina had been talking for nearly 2 hours. To Nina's surprise, the conversation had flowed with an ease she hadn't expected. She found herself telling Brad stories about Jackson, his love for breakfast food at night, the way he used to whistle off-key while folding laundry, how he'd carry Liam on his shoulders through the park like he was the king of the world. She wasn't sure what made it so easy to talk to Brad. Maybe because he was a stranger, one who had no expectations, no shared grief history. Or maybe it was the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, just like Jackson's did. Or the way he listened, fully, not just hearing her words, but holding them. "It's strange," she admitted quietly, stirring her straw. "Sitting here with you, it's like talking to Jackson again. Not exactly, but close." Brad's smile was gentle, touched by something unspoken. "I don't take that lightly." He leaned back and shared bits of his own story, his parents' small-town roots, his father's passing when he was in college, and how his mother still lived in Connecticut. He spoke of building Wellington Industries from a shoestring operation into a national powerhouse. But when he mentioned relationships, his tone dimmed slightly. "I was engaged once," he said, fingers tracing the condensation on his glass. 4 years ago. I ended it. She was more in love with my ambition than me." Nina gave a quiet nod. Jackson was always all in, for better or worse. They both chuckled softly, then fell into a reflective silence. "So, no connection to Jackson?" Brad asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. "Not yet," Nina said. "But I can call his parents. Maybe there's a cousin or something we don't know about." "I'd appreciate that," Brad said. "And I can talk to my mother too. See if there's anything in our family tree that might connect." As they talked, Liam sat at the end of the booth with a paper placemat and crayons, humming softly as he drew. His tongue poked from the corner of his mouth in concentration, sketching a man holding hands with a little boy under a big sun and a rainbow. Nina glanced at him, then back at Brad with a stunned look in her eyes. "He hasn't done that, not since Jackson died." Brad followed her gaze, watching Liam with quiet awe. "I'm worried," she whispered. That he thinks his father sent you to help us. That you're some kind of sign." Brad looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to Liam, who had just added a dog with lopsided ears to the picture. "Maybe he did," Brad said softly. "Strange things have happened, and sometimes kids understand things we can't." Mina didn't argue. Instead, she just watched her son drawing, her heart tight and light at the same time, wondering if this unexpected afternoon had been more than just coincidence. Every Sunday evening, like clockwork, Brad had dinner with his mother, Kathy Wellington. It was a quiet tradition the two of them had kept since his father passed years ago. This particular Sunday, the air carried more questions than usual. The table was set neatly in his mother's townhouse: roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, and a small glass of red wine at each place. Brad waited until they'd both eaten a few bites before gently bringing it up. "Mom," he began carefully, "do you remember Dad ever mentioning having family out west? Like a cousin, brother? Anyone?" Kylie paused, her fork mid-air. Her brows furrowed as she slowly set it down. "No, not that I recall," she said, thinking. "Why do you ask?" Brad took a sip of wine, then exhaled. "There's a little boy I met at a school I donated supplies to. His name is Liam Browning. He said I looked like his father, Jackson. His mom and I have talked a bit since then. We thought maybe there was a family connection." Kathy blinked. "Browning? No, that doesn't ring any bells. Could Dad have had a half-brother? Or something you didn't know about?" Her eyes softened with regret. "Brad, your father and I divorced when you were 7. After that, he moved to the West Coast. We didn't stay in touch beyond the basics. And when he died, well, there was no mention of any extended family. I was focused on raising you." Brad nodded, the answer not unexpected but still a letdown. "Maybe check with the family lawyer," she added. "He handled your father's estate. If there's anything hidden in the paperwork, he'd know." Meanwhile, across town, Nina sat on her back porch, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to Jackson's parents. Liam played with sidewalk chalk nearby, carefully outlining a rainbow. "Mom, Dad," Nina said slowly, "do you have any relatives named Wellington? Or maybe someone who had distanced themselves from the family on either side of the family?" There was a pause on the line, then his mother answered, "Honey, not that I know of. Jackson's father had 2 sisters. One lives in Texas, and the other passed years ago. No one by that name ever came up." "Okay, just thought I'd ask," Nina replied, trying not to sound too disappointed. 2 weeks later, Brad, Nina, and Liam sat at the same booth in Rosie's diner, sipping their usual milkshakes. The comfort between them had grown. The conversations, once careful, now flowed more freely. They had exchanged several calls in the past days, brief check-ins, light-hearted updates, and more laughter than either expected. "I talked to our family lawyer," Brad said, stirring his straw. "No records of any lost relatives, just one neat, clean line with my name at the end of it." Nina gave a soft chuckle. "Same here. Jackson's side is pretty straightforward. We even dug out his grandmother's old family Bible. No Wellington anywhere." Brad looked over at Liam, who was playing with a toy fire truck by the window. "Guess it really was just a coincidence. Or something else entirely," Nina said, meeting his eyes. "I think Liam believed maybe Jackson sent you." Brad nodded slowly, not dismissing the idea. "And maybe I needed to be sent." They sat in thoughtful silence, the hum of the diner surrounding them like a warm blanket. Whatever the reason for their crossing paths, one thing had become clear. Some connections don't require blood to be real. The following weeks passed like chapters in a book. Nina hadn't realized she'd started reading. What began as occasional conversations and casual check-ins grew into dinners on weeknights, impromptu park visits, and weekend outings that seemed to write themselves. Liam took to Brad like sun to morning light, always at his side, always grinning. And Brad showed up without hesitation. Patient, kind, and attentive, not just to Liam, but to her. It was during a Saturday trip to the aquarium that the shift truly revealed itself. The three of them moved from exhibit to exhibit, Brad guiding Liam's small hand as they watched jellyfish pulse through blue light, sea turtles drift lazily past the glass. Nina watched from behind them, both smiling without knowing it. For a moment, they looked like any other family. They made their way to the shark tunnel, just as a tour group surged in behind them, filling the space with chatter and noise. Liam, who was normally okay with crowds, suddenly turned and clung to Brad's arm. Brad instinctively crouched and lifted the boy onto his shoulders with practiced ease. "Don't worry, buddy, I got you." Then, without looking, he reached for Nina's hand. She froze for a beat. His fingers slid between hers, warm and confident. It wasn't a bold move. There was no tension in it. It felt natural. Still, her heart stuttered. She tried not to read too much into it. He was just being kind, steadying her through the crowd, right? But when they emerged from the tunnel and the noise fell away, Brad didn't let go. Not until Liam wriggled to be set down at the next exhibit. The three of them stood watching the stingrays glide past in near silence. A sense of calm falling over them like a soft wave. Nina caught herself stealing glances at Brad, wondering when this man had become more than a friend. They left the aquarium just before sunset. Brad walked them to her car, carrying Liam, who had fallen asleep on his shoulder. Nina opened the back door, gently lifting her son and buckling him in. When she closed the door, she turned to find Brad still standing close, watching her with that familiar, unreadable softness in his eyes. "Thanks for today," she said, voice hushed. "It was perfect," he replied. Then, with the faintest smile, he leaned in and kissed her cheek. It was light, barely more than a brush of his lips, but it lit a fire of confusion in her chest. "Good night, Nina." "Good night," she whispered back, eyes lingering as he walked away. That night, after Liam had been tucked into bed, Nina sat on the edge of hers, staring at her phone screen in the dark. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The guilt crept in like a fog. She didn't know if what she felt for Brad was real, or if she just missed the feeling of being cared for. Missed Jackson. Was it too soon? Was it betrayal to feel anything for someone else? She buried her face in her hands, caught between the comfort Brad brought and the shadow of the man she lost. One thing was certain. Her heart was waking up again. And it terrified her. The next morning, the air was crisp and the sky cloudless as Nina pulled into the long gravel driveway of Jackson's parents' house. It was a place that still felt like home. A quiet refuge nestled on the edge of town where Liam had taken his first steps on the back porch and where Jackson used to mow the lawn shirtless every Saturday morning with music blasting from the garage. Delia and Robert Browning welcomed her in with warm smiles and strong coffee, the way they always had. Liam immediately disappeared into the living room, plopping down with a box of old toys while Robert settled into his recliner and turned on the football game. Nina sat in the kitchen with Delia, helping chop vegetables for lunch. But her hands moved slower than usual, her gaze flicking toward the window more than once, her laugh a little too delayed. After a couple of hours and countless sidelong glances, Delia finally set down the knife and gently touched Nina's arm. "Okay, baby," she said softly. "What's going on?" "You've been distracted all morning." Nina looked at her mother-in-law, lips trembling. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. A moment later, tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know if I can let Jackson go," she whispered. Delia's expression didn't shift with surprise. Instead, she nodded knowingly and guided Nina toward the small breakfast nook by the window, away from the boys. "This is about Mr. Wellington, isn't it?" Nina's head dropped. "Yes, I have mixed emotions. We've been spending time together. He's amazing with Liam. Kind, patient, thoughtful. But it's been all those 2 years since Jackson passed, and I don't know if my feelings for Brad are genuine, or if I'm just trying to replace what I lost." Delia reached across the table and took her hands. "Baby, the heart is funny. It doesn't move in a straight line. And grief has no rules." Nina looked up, voice thick with emotion. "I feel like if I let myself love Brad, I'm erasing Jackson. Like I'm betraying him." Delia squeezed her hands firmly. "You're not. Jackson loved you, Nina. I know my son. He would want you to find joy again, especially with someone who cares for Liam the way Brad clearly does." Nina blinked back more tears. I haven't told him, Brad, about how I feel. I'm afraid if I say it out loud, he'll think I'm confused, or that I don't really want him. Delia smiled gently. Then tell him the truth. Don't run away from something good because you're afraid. If Brad is as kind as you say, he'll understand. He won't expect you to forget Jackson. He'll just want to be part of what comes next. Nina took a deep breath, tears still clinging to her lashes. You think I deserve that? That Liam does? I know you do, Delia said. You both deserve happiness again. Real happiness. She reached up and wiped a tear from Nina's cheek. Now wipe your eyes, sweetheart, Delia said with a warm smile. Let's go enjoy the rest of the day. Liam's got about 15 action figures up, and I think Grandpa just stepped on one. Nina laughed through her tears, something inside her beginning to ease for the first time in a long time. Maybe she was ready to stop running. Maybe it was time to let hope in again. Nina had just stepped out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel and her robe cinched tight, when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up, wiping a bit of steam from the screen, and saw a message from Brad. Brad, can you and Liam come to my place for dinner tomorrow? Her heart jumped unexpectedly. Brad's place. She hadn't been there yet, though he was never boastful. Nina knew Brad came from a life of wealth, far beyond anything she'd experienced growing up or even during her marriage. And now, he was inviting her into that space, into his world. Before she could respond, another text popped up. I need to talk to you. Can you come? Her fingers hesitated over the screen, a flutter of nerves and anticipation running through her. Then she typed, Nina, do I need to bring anything? Brad, no, just an empty stomach and a huge smile. She smiled without realizing it and exhaled. Okay, she whispered aloud. The next evening, Nina and Liam pulled up to Brad's gated townhouse. It was grand, yes, but more than that, it was beautiful in a way that felt lived in. As they stepped inside, Nina was surprised by the warmth. Earth-toned furniture, shelves filled with books and photos, and the soft aroma of garlic and rosemary wafting from the kitchen. Liam ran ahead after Brad welcomed them in, immediately drawn to a corner where a box of puzzles and superhero toys waited. You cooked? Nina asked, impressed as she watched Brad stir a pot on the stove. Don't sound so surprised, he chuckled. I'm not completely helpless. Dinner was cozy. Roasted chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, green beans, and homemade cornbread. They laughed over Liam's stories from school, and Nina felt herself letting go more than she had in a long time. After they cleared the dishes and Liam was content watching cartoons in the next room, Brad turned to her with an almost nervous glance. There's something I've been meaning to ask, he began. Would you like to meet my mother? Nina blinked. Oh, wow, that's big. It is, he admitted. Because you and Liam are important to me, and I'd really like her to meet you both. Nina's heart swelled at his words, but then, almost immediately, a knot formed in her chest. Her eyes welled unexpectedly. I don't know if that would be right, she whispered. Brad's face fell slightly. Why not? She turned to him, voice trembling. Because I'm not sure what I'm feeling. I care about you, Brad. I really do. But I don't know if those feelings are real, or if I'm just trying to fill a hole Jackson left behind. I don't want to hurt you if I'm wrong. If this is something I'm confused about. Brad nodded slowly, absorbing every word without a hint at anger. I understand, he said gently. My face, my voice, they're a problem, right? A reminder. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. He took a small breath, then smiled softly. But Nina, are our actions the same? She tilted her head, uncertain. What do you mean? Brad leaned forward, his voice light but steady. Did Jackson love classical music? Because I do. It calms my mind. She blinked. No, he hated it. Did he have 2 left feet on the dance floor? Brad grinned. Because I do. It's tragic, really. She laughed, the first real laugh since dinner. No, Jackson could dance circles around anyone. Did he think romance movies were better than action ones? Nina giggled. Absolutely not. He thought rom-coms were a punishment. "See?" Brad said with a gentle smile. "Let's take time to learn who I am. No rush, no pressure, just see me, and hopefully in that time, you'll know that what you feel is for me. Not because I remind you of him, but because I'm worth caring for in my own way." Nina blinked back fresh tears and reached forward, brushing her fingers along his jaw, before leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." Brad's smile was warm, hopeful. "So, can I call my mom and tell her to expect 2 more for Sunday dinner?" he asked gently. Nina hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "You can." Brad's mother, Kathy Wellington, opened the door with the warmest smile Nina had ever seen. "There they are," she beamed, arms outstretched. "I've heard so much about you two." She pulled Nina into a gentle hug and crouched slightly to offer Liam a warm embrace and a soft pat on the head. "And you must be the brave Liam I've heard all about. Come in, both of you." The house was a stately colonial with polished floors, elegant trim, and the delicious aroma of roasted chicken and fresh bread wafting through the air. But despite the grandeur, everything about it felt warm and lived in, just like Brad. Kathy ushered them inside, leading them through the foyer and into the bright, spacious kitchen. Sunlight poured in through the garden-facing windows, casting a soft glow across the room. "Brad, why don't you take Liam out back and see if the butterflies are still in the garden?" Kathy suggested with a playful wink. "They've been fluttering near the lavender all morning." Brad glanced at Nina for a beat, silently checking in. She gave him a nod. "All right, Liam," he said, already moving toward the back door. "Let's go chase some butterflies." As the door closed behind them, Nina remained at the kitchen island, unsure whether to sit or stand. "You can help," Kathy said, handing her a small bowl of carrots. Nina smiled. Gladly. They worked in silence for a few minutes, chopping, stirring, tasting, before Kathy's voice broke the quiet. "You are nothing like the nightmare Brad was in love with 4 years ago," she said bluntly, though not unkindly. Nina paused, startled. I didn't realize." Kathy gave her a side glance, still slicing herbs. "Don't worry, it's not a sore subject. Not anymore, at least." Took him a while to get over it, though. "What happened?" Nina asked carefully, not wanting to pry, but unable to resist the curiosity. Kathy sighed. Her name was Bella Marshall. Nina nearly dropped the spoon she was holding. "The famous socialite?" Kathy rolled her eyes with a scoff. "Famous, yes, but fame doesn't make a person decent. That girl has a heart of stone and can't be trusted." Nina swallowed hard. "I had no idea. Brad was totally blind," Kathy continued. "I tried to warn him, but he was too busy with his company to see she was only after his money, not his heart. He met her at a gala. They got swept up fast, and before we knew it, he was engaged." "What changed?" Nina asked gently. After the engagement, the mask started to slip. He began noticing how she treated people, waitstaff, drivers, even the office assistants, like they were beneath her. She had a sharp tongue and an ego to match. Then came the spending. Lord, that girl went through his credit cards like a wildfire. Designer everything, luxury retreats, photo shoots. She had to be in the spotlight constantly, even though she already came for money. Why did it end? He caught her yelling at one of his assistants over a minor scheduling error, belittling him in public. That's when he really saw her. Called off the wedding a week later. Nina nodded slowly. A mixture of surprise and admiration filling her chest. "That must have been hard." "It was," Kathy said, softening. "But it made room for something better. For someone better like you." Nina flushed, but didn't respond. Kathy patted her hand. "I can tell you're not here for what Brad has. You're here for who he is. And honey, that's all I've ever wanted for my son." Outside, laughter echoed from the garden as Brad lifted Liam to chase a butterfly, their joy floating through the window like music. And in that moment, Nina felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace, and maybe even hope. The Wellington Industries annual gala shimmered with elegance: crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, and a ballroom full of polished executives, dazzling gowns, and clinking champagne glasses. Brad and Nina walked in arm in arm, both dressed to perfection, Brad in a sleek black tuxedo, and Nina in a deep emerald gown that complemented her skin and sparkled under the lights. Heads turned as they entered, and more than a few whispers followed them. Brad leaned over and whispered in her ear, "You look like you just walked off the cover of a magazine." Nina laughed softly. "You're biased." "Completely," he grinned. The evening had gone beautifully. Speeches, laughter, a little dancing, and introductions to some of Brad's board members. Nina felt more comfortable than she expected, proud to be by his side, until she saw her. Bella Marshall. She made her entrance like a storm in satin, long legs, fire-red lips, and a designer gown that shimmered like liquid metal. Her eyes scanned the room like a hunter until they landed on Brad, and then she was moving toward them with purpose. "Brace yourself," Brad muttered, his jaw tightening. Nina stood taller. "Brad," Bella purred, her voice as smooth as aged wine. "I missed you, sweetheart." Brad kept his expression neutral. "That's surprising. I thought you'd been too busy to miss anyone." Bella's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's never too late, Brad. You and we had something electric. It's time to let the past go. We can always make room for the future." Brad took a deliberate step closer to Nina and reached for her hand. "Bella," he said calmly, "this is Nina, and she and her son are my future." Bella's eyes flicked to Nina, scanning her from head to toe with an obvious sneer. "Really?" she said with mock surprise. "I just don't see it. She's missing something." Nina didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice poised and razor-sharp. "Yes, I'm missing something. I'm missing arrogance, greed, entitlement, and every toxic trait you so proudly wear like a diamond choker." Bella's smile faltered. "Let's get one thing straight," Nina continued, her tone calm but firm. "When Brad says I'm his future, he means wife. And he means father to my son. That's not just a title, it's a promise. One you blew your chance at the moment you treated him like a bank instead of a man." People nearby had stopped talking, heads turned. "And if you're thinking about coming after me, thinking I'll be easy to rattle, let me help you understand something." Nina's eyes locked with Bella's. "I'm not a weak woman. I know who I am. I know my worth, and I will not let anyone walk into my life and tear down what we've built, not even you." For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Brad burst into laughter. Loud, real, unrestrained, his arm wrapped protectively around Nina as he tried to catch his breath. "That," he chuckled, "was better than any boardroom speech I've ever given." Bella's face hardened. "We'll see how long it lasts." Nina smiled coolly. "Yes, we will." Bella turned with a dramatic flip of her hair and stalked away, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Brad leaned in, still grinning. "Remind me to never get on your bad side." Nina smirked. "Good. Keep that in mind." As the music swelled and the crowd returned to their mingling, Brad kissed her temple. "Have I told you how proud I am of you?" She squeezed his hand. "Not yet. But I'll let you show me on the dance floor." And with that, they stepped into the center of the ballroom, not just as a couple, but as something real, unshakable, and unafraid. The scent of butter and maple syrup drifted through Kathy Wellington's cozy kitchen as Nina and Brad stepped inside, hand in hand. The sound of laughter met them before they even rounded the corner. Liam stood at the stove in his little dinosaur pajamas, proudly flipping a pancake with Kathy beside him, guiding his hand gently. "Good morning, Mom and Dad," Liam said brightly, beaming over his shoulder. "Me and Granny are making pancakes." Nina blinked, her eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Mom and Dad?" Brad chuckled as Kathy turned around with a knowing smile, a smear of flour on her cheek. "Oh, don't look so shocked," Kathy said, waving her spatula. "We saw the video." Nina's eyes widened. "What video?" Kathy leaned casually against the counter. "The one where you told off Bella Marshall like a queen. Liam showed me first thing this morning. He insisted it made you internet famous." Liam bounced on his toes. "Oh yeah, Mom. You should see the comments. People love you. They said you're a role model." "You told her off so good." Nina groaned and covered her mouth with one hand. Oh no, it's really on social media? Brad laughed. Oh yes, over 200,000 views last time I checked. You really went viral, Mom, Liam grinned. Nina looked at Kathy, still stunned. You let him watch that? Kathy shrugged with a smile. What can I say? He's proud of you. We all are. As the laughter settled, Brad reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He held it for a moment, then gently placed it on the kitchen counter in front of Nina. Her breath caught. He turned to face her fully, eyes filled with both certainty and vulnerability. I like the sound of Dad, he said softly, but more than that, I love the sound of us, you, me, and Liam, and I want to make that forever. Nina stared at the box, then looked into his eyes. You asked me once. Brad continued, if I was sure. And now I'm asking you, are you really ready? Nina took a slow breath, her hand trembling just slightly as she reached out and touched the box. She looked at Liam, who was watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. Then she looked back at Brad, her voice quiet but clear. Yes, she whispered. I'm ready. Brad smiled, his eyes misting, and slowly lowered himself to one knee. He opened the box to reveal a delicate, shimmering ring, elegant and timeless. Nina Browning, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Will you marry me? Before Nina could even answer, Liam clapped his hands and declared proudly, I knew my dad sent you to us. Nina laughed through her tears, nodding quickly. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Brad slid the ring onto her finger and stood, wrapping her in a tender embrace as Liam launched himself around both of their legs. Kathy wiped her eyes with her apron, grinning from ear to ear. Pancakes forgotten. The kitchen now filled with something sweeter. Family found and chosen, sealed with a yes. 2 years later, the late afternoon sun spilled golden light across the front lawn of Brad and Nina's new home. A beautiful craftsman-style house nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac, filled with warm colors, wide windows, and laughter echoing through the halls. The front door swung open with a burst of energy. Where are my grandbabies? Kathy's voice rang through the house like music. Inside, the living room was alive with warmth. Jackson's parents, Delia and Robert Browning, were already seated on the cozy sectional, glowing with joy. Delia cradled a tiny pink bundle in her arms, baby Jasmine, just home from the hospital that morning. She's in here, Kathy, Delia called out, smiling down at the sleeping newborn. The little angel just dozed off. Kathy rounded the corner with a dramatic gasp. Oh my goodness, let me see her. She hurried over, stooping down beside Delia and peeking into the baby's swaddle. Jasmine yawned in her sleep, completely unaware she had just stolen everyone's heart. She looks like both of them, Kathy whispered, eyes glistening. But she's definitely got Brad's nose. Robert chuckled. And Nina's calm. Let's hope she keeps it. In the corner, Liam stood tall and proud, hands on his hips, watching the room with a satisfied grin. He wore his Big Brother t-shirt and had spent the entire morning introducing Jasmine to each room of the house, even if she slept through most of it. I'm in charge of her toys, he announced to no one in particular. And books, and lullabies. Kathy turned to him, smiling. Oh, I know you are, sweetheart. You're the best big brother any little girl could ask for. Brad and Nina entered from the kitchen, arms around each other, both still looking a little tired, but happy beyond measure. Hey Mom, Brad said with a laugh. You didn't waste any time getting here. Kathy smiled proudly. I have a granddaughter. I wasn't going to wait another second. Nina leaned over to kiss Jasmine's forehead as she took her from Delia. She's home, she whispered, and she has everyone she'll ever need, right here. Liam wrapped his arms around Nina's waist, looking up at the tiny bundle in her arms. Now our family is really complete. And in that moment, with laughter, love, and generations gathered under one roof, it truly was. Thank you for listening to this wonderful story by Green Tea Tellis. Help our channel to grow by subscribing. Thank you.